The New York State Capitol building that we know today has over 150 years of history behind it. With so much history, there are hundreds of stories it could tell. But none are more powerful or important than that of the Great Western Staircase.
The Civil War has just concluded, and New York is on the north side. And there's a great deal of empire building and state capitol building in America, and New York is also part of that.
New York State was thriving as a result, economically thriving and economically growing as a result of the Civil War. And one of the consequences of that was the state government again grew. And the original Capitol building by Philip Hooker was woefully inadequate.
So there's a competition in 1866 to design a new Capitol for New York State. It's well publicized around the world in North America and in Europe. And the New York State legislature hires a young architect from England named Thomas Fuller. He wins the competition because he says, I can build you a brand new building for $4 million in 4 years. Thomas Fuller was well known because he had just completed the Parliament building in Ottawa, Canada. So 1867, the construction of the Capitol begins. However, after 10 years and $10 million, the Capitol is barely out of the ground. They have the first and second floor complete, so there's an investigation. And two young architects from New York City, H.H. Richardson and Leopold Eidlitz, lead the investigation. And they find several things: that Thomas Fuller's design is flawed and that his materials are inferior, and they recommend that Thomas Fuller be let go. Also part of their recommendations is who should take over in Thomas Fuller's place, and they recommend themselves.
The foundations were worthy of a better conceived building, commensurate with the grandeur of the Empire State. In short, they said the building lacked the necessary repose and dignity for the capital of New York State. They edited their plans to better suit their views of the Capitol building, and after Fuller was dismissed in July of 1876, and Richardson, Eidlitz, and Olmsted were appointed Capitol architects in September of the same year. They divided the building amongst themselves. Eidlitz was allotted the northern portion of the building, and Richardson the south. He was also responsible for the Great Western Staircase. Richardson planned for the staircase to be topped with a dome, and for there to be minimal amounts of carving. He only planned for life-size lions to be carved at the base, and female figures holding up the lights at the top of the stairs, along with basic carvings on the arches and capitals. Unfortunately, Richardson succumbed to Bright's disease in 1886, and there was a need for a new architect. Grover Cleveland, the governor, personally interviewed applicants. Cleveland invited architect Isaac Perry to meet with him. Perry accepted and became the Capitol architect in 1886. Isaac Perry did not follow Richardson's plans for the Great Western Staircase. He changed Richardson's dome to a skylight and added the carvings that adorn the staircase today.
At one point, there were over 600 stone carvers working on the staircase. One of the most notable features of the Great Western Staircase, besides its broad, flat plains of ashlar stone, are these large floored areas of intricately carved stone. And nestled in among the carvings are 77 faces, and they were prominent 19th century people: poets, politicians, inventors, and governors. In addition, we have about 100 other portraits without names, and we call those the Capitol Unknowns. Very few of them have been identified. Sometimes the stone carvers were given free range. They would pick people from their family to carve, or they would pick interesting people they saw on the street. Besides faces, we have leaves, we have ships, we have emblems, and we also have little green men, or gnomes and devils, peeking out from the leaves. After 32 years and $25 million, the Capitol is declared complete on February 4th, 1899 by then Governor Teddy Roosevelt. In the spring of 1911, there's a catastrophic fire on the 4th floor in the northwest corner, which was believed to be caused by faulty wiring. And it started in what was the assembly library. So you had books as fuel, you had non-compartmentalized corridors, and you had this large, vast open staircase. And the building was essentially unoccupied because it was in the evening. So the fire spread very quickly, it consumed the library, hopped over walls, got to another library on the west side, and began to consume the Great Western Staircase.
Immediately following the fire, the melted portions of stone were replaced and the skylight was repaired.
In 1978, the New York State Senate chamber was restored, pristine, well-researched restoration. During that process, a committee was appointed to oversee that and approve it, and I was on that committee and was chairman of that committee. That project was so successful, well received by the legislature and the public, that Governor Carey passed legislation to create a temporary commission on the restoration of the Capitol, and I was appointed to that. Our first major project was to prepare a master plan for the restoration of the entire building and to set out the priority of spaces that should be restored.
The Capitol building itself is quite large, obviously, and the roof needed to be restored. Because it was so large, there was no way to be able to bid and bond a project of that magnitude. So the only way to do that would be to split it up into four different quadrants. And the phase 4 were the 2 skylights and lay lights, which were the most significant and wonderful pieces of that.
I believe it was World War II, if I understand correctly, that they covered the inner lay light of the skylight. So it wouldn't be like a bombing target for not only the city of Albany, but also for the arsenal down there in Watervliet. And what happened is, when they covered it over with that crab paper, we didn't realize how bad it was until we took the crab paper off and we found there was major holes size of a softball in the glass there. It was very dingy and broken, and we had to pretty much do a little bit more extensive work than we planned originally.
This staircase originally was known as very dark and very black because the stone was in fact very black. So we did a lot of test cleaning, a test clean program, and we did some petrographic analysis of the stone itself to identify what the dirt was. And primarily it was grease from fingers and soiling from cigarette and cigar smoking. So as part of our test program, we looked at various ways to clean the stone, from at one end of the spectrum just using a dry vacuum, to just water, to even some acid pre-wash chemical systems. And in our process of investigation, we found another cleaning method called Artemundit.
And it's a latex product that gets sprayed on the stone and dwells for overnight, and you come back and peel it off, and it's almost like peeling a latex glove off the wall.
And you saw the carvings, how detailed they are. Think about trying to scrub that, or trying to get like a little toothbrush or something to get in there, and you can't get in there. So spraying this applied product was a perfect idea.
And it was user-friendly. You didn't have to seal off the staircase while it was being cleaned.
We knew the restoration was complete when we had a big unveiling ceremony. We stood on the staircase with Governor Pataki and the OGS commissioner at the time, Kenneth Ringler, and the chairman of the Capitol Commission, Matthew Bender, and myself, and we had the upper side of the glass ceiling covered with tarps. We all said a few wonderful words about the Capitol and the skilled people who worked on the building.
The governor arrived and he pulled the curtain. The sun was shining like today. The sun came down and everybody went like this. It was wonderful.
And we all knew that there would be light. What we didn't realize was at 2:30 in the afternoon, it would be almost directly overhead. And literally, as Isaac Perry predicted in the 19th century, there was a flood of light, again, back in the Great Western Staircase.
Although the restoration of the Great Western Staircase was an immense undertaking, it was well worth it because of the significance and symbolism that it holds for all New Yorkers.
In there is the history of New York State and some of the history of the nation because of the people who are there. Of course, there are state people, but then there are people like Abraham Lincoln.
Sometimes old buildings are just old buildings, but so much history happens here in the New York State Capitol. that it's very important to restore our architecture. It is considered part of our culture. So if we pay attention to our culture, we pay attention to our history, we can plan for our future and learn lessons. So this is just a small example of how we can invest in the future of both our buildings and our physical assets here in the state.
It links us to our past. We live in today, and it's a way for us to look back and see what our forefathers gave us and were trying to tell us, and the designs and the beauty that they provided for us. Too often we want to eliminate those things and all go completely new and say, oh, new is so much better. Well, not necessarily. In the summer of 1861, Lincoln ordered the Capitol Dome to be completed. It was during the Civil War, and people wanted to stop working on it, and he insisted that they continue working on the dome because it showed a sense of pride, a kind of a unity for the people by continuing on this project that was a symbol of our freedom and of our country. So often people complain that maybe we shouldn't be spending the money we are on restoring something and putting it into the Capitol, or even maybe another building. But for the Capitol specifically, I think it's very significant to use that, to consider that as a symbol of our state, to consider that as a symbol. That's where the government happens, that's where decisions are made, and that building provides a sense of unity for the people in our state. So fixing it up, cleaning it up, making it special, and continuing to show how wonderful it is and that it continues to be a symbol is, I think, very important.